See, last night I thought I had lots of energy when I started, and then after one video, I was tanked. So, although I came last night expecting to do more than one video, only one video got done. So, we did not get caught up last night, but we did not get further behind either. Ta-da! So, I'm not making any promises anymore. I am just going to go as the Lord moves me, and we'll see how far we get today. How about that? But I feel a little energized, and I have a later morning in the morning, so we'll see. We'll see how far we get here. All right, so let's see. Let me give this at least a couple of minutes to see who's coming on to join me tonight. We will see who's joining me. See, energy. I don't know. I promise there's nothing in the tea. It's just energy. Had a pretty good day today. Better day after a long, a couple of weeks. I felt like today was a good day. So maybe because I got caught up. I was so behind at work, and I got caught up at work, so that felt pretty good. Still a little behind, but it's not my fault now that I'm behind. Now I'm waiting on other people to catch up with me. So I think that's maybe why I feel a little better, because that's a little stress alleviated. And when I catch up here, let me tell you how much stress will be alleviated. Because I don't like to have you guys behind, and I hope you're going on without me, and that you have been continuing your reading even without me, because without me you should be, let's see, what is today? You should be in Judges today, right? Yeah, you should be starting Judges today. So I am behind, but that does not mean you need to be behind. So hopefully you're doing your reading, because you should be starting Judges and waiting for me to catch up, right? All right, let's go ahead and get started. We are in Joshua. Woohoo! Yay! Root, right? We left off in Joshua 5, where the people were getting circumcised, right? So we talked about how a whole generation had gone through the wilderness without being circumcised, but that was the law of the land, so everyone had to be circumcised when they came to the new land. And we also talked about how the manna stopped. They had their first meal from the land, right? They ate from the land that flows with milk and honey, and the moment they ate from that land, the manna stopped, right? And then we left off, and I told you we would open with this in this video, with Joshua actually being visited by an angel. The Bible actually doesn't specifically say, but people have called this an angel. But it says he looked up and saw a man standing in front of him with a drawn sword. There are lots of people who believe that this would have been Jesus in his spiritual form, right? Coming to earth in whatever spiritual form he could take on at the time. Nevertheless, the Bible does not distinguish between whether this is an angel or whether this is Jesus. We know it wouldn't be Jesus in the flesh as we know Jesus, because he was not born by a woman. So he would be presented in some spiritual form that looked like a man. And we don't know this for sure, but we do know that Joshua, when he replied to Joshua, he replied as the commander of the army of the Lord, right? And so then lots of people believe that then that means this was Gabriel, the archangel who was the commander of the army of the Lord. according to what theologians believe. So there are many different thoughts on this. I personally don't believe that it's so important for us to know exactly who it is, as long as we know that the word that he was coming to represent came from the Lord himself. And so this was interesting to me, and I wanted to really hone in on this part because when Joshua saw him, how about I just read it and then I'll tell you the part that stood out for me. So I'm in chapter 5, verse 13. It says, "Now when Joshua was near Jericho, he looked up and saw a man standing in front of him with a drawn sword in his hand. Joshua went up to him and asked, 'Are you for us or for our enemies?'" And so Joshua is like, hold up. So I see this man with a sword drawn all of a sudden standing in front of me. I need to know, whose side are you on, right? So that was interesting to me. But the more interesting thing to me was how the man answered. He said, "Neither." Stop there. Have you really read this before and noticed that the man said neither? Now, I probably have read this at least 10 times in my lifetime, right? Maybe more. I'm giving myself 10, right? And I never really paid attention to the fact that he said neither, right? I mean, he said neither. He said, basically, are you for us or against us? Are you for us or for our enemies? And basically, the man is like, neither. I work for God. What? That answer is really awesome, because basically I am not here, the man or the angel, right, or the spirit sent by God is saying, I'm not here to take sides. This is petty. Like, I'm not here to take sides, right? I'm here to deliver a message from the Lord. I'm not here to take a side. This world is not my home, right? This is not where I am. My message comes from the Lord. What made me think about that so deeply when I was reading it this time is I was thinking about how many Christians at this point in time in history where we are taking sides on issues where really they should be saying neither. What do you mean? I'm probably going to be getting politically incorrect here for some people, but really listen to what I'm saying. We're having like huge arguments over whether people are Republican or Democrat, whether people are conservative or liberal, whether or progressive. We're having huge arguments on where people stand with these things, when really we should be saying neither, right? Because God can use either side, and we as humans don't know which side God is going to use for what, right? And so really we should be saying neither. I'm not going to align myself with, I don't know what God is going to use in what time and in what way he will use it. So neither. So Joshua's like, are you for us or are you for the enemy? And the man of God said, neither. I'm here to give you a word, right? I think that's so deep. And if we could really get our minds wrapped around how not to get so overly consumed with the things that are going on in this world, that we miss the point that this world is not our home. They used to sing those songs back in the church. In the old days, they used to always keep cognizant in your mind that this world is not your home. I can't feel at home in this world anymore. Anybody remember that song? Yes, we used to sing all the time about how this world is not our home. We've got to think about that. So I just really want to point that out because it was so mind-blowing to me, and it may have only been Rhema word for me, I don't know, but I share all the Rhema word that comes to me with the hopes that maybe it'll hit someone else like it hit me. And so here you have the commander of the Lord's army. We're going into chapter 6. He told At the end of chapter 5, Joshua, take off your shoes. You're standing on holy ground. So Joshua takes off his shoes. Hence the practice of some churches, which will have you take off your shoes before you come into their sanctuary. If you ever wanted to know why people did that, this is one of the scriptures they use to justify that. And so basically the man of God is telling Joshua how he's going to take Jericho, right? He's telling him the Lord is with you. Verse 2 of chapter 6 says, then the Lord, see now, he was calling him the commander of the Lord's army. So you see why some people say that was the Archangel Gabriel, right? But then in verse 2, here it says, then the Lord said to Joshua. So then you see how some people say, oh, well, this was Jesus in clothing himself in a natural form that looks like a man, right? So you can see, but again, it doesn't matter. The word is what mattered, right? But in verse 2, he said, then the Lord said to Joshua, see, I have delivered Jericho into your hands, along with its kings and its fighting men. And he gives him the battle plans. He tells him what to do. He says, march around the city once with all the armed men. Do this for 6 days. Have 7 priests carry trumpets of ram's horn in front of the ark. On the 7th day, march around the city 7 times, with the priests blowing the trumpets. When you hear them sound a long blast on the trumpets, have the whole army give a loud shout. Then the wall of the city will collapse and the army will go up, everyone straight in. And so here the man of God is giving Joshua the battle plans, right? And these are some very strange battle plans. Now remember, they are coming out of Egypt. They have been in the wilderness like 40 years. They have fought wars while in the wilderness. They fought and defeated 2 kings while in the wilderness already. So they're like hearing God say that you are about to capture Jericho, which is a huge city surrounded by a huge wall that encapsulates the whole city, right? Remember when they went in to spy on the city, it had gates that came up at a certain time in the evening, and when those gates came up, nobody could get in or out of the city, right? Because it was these huge walls. The spies actually had to scale the walls and climb down on the outside just to get away. So imagine ready for this war, but you looking at these walls like, what are we going to do about these walls? How are we going to get in these walls? And the Lord tells Joshua, well, what you're going to do is just march your men around, 6 days in a row. You're going to march around once. I don't want you to say anything. I don't want you to do anything. I want you to carry horns, but not blow them, right? And you're just going to do that for 6 days. The 7th day, you're going to march around 7 times with these same horns. But on the 7th time, you're going to blow those horns as loud as possible. The people are going to shout. And guess what? When you do all that, the walls are just going to come down. What? Can you imagine Joshua? Here, the text doesn't really tell us like his reaction emotionally, right? But can you just put yourself in Joseph's, I'm sorry, I keep saying Joseph, but in Joshua's shoes right now? Think of Joshua and what he must have been feeling like. Lord, even if he never said it, right? Lord, you want me to do, you want me to do what? You want me to tell these people what? You want me to go to my army and tell the army of fighting men that you had me build that we're about to do what? Right? But guess what? No matter what he was feeling, no matter what his emotions was going through, no matter what he may have been thinking in his mind, no matter how crazy he thought this plan was, he was obedient. And the important thing to know here is like obedience doesn't really take your agreement. And I think that's where we go wrong, is that sometimes we're trying to wait to align ourselves to agree with God before we obey. But guess what? Obedience doesn't take your agreement. You can do what God said, even if you don't know how, why, or if it's going to work or whatever. You can still do what God says and just be blindly obedient. And you can tell God, you know what, I don't really necessarily agree with this. It doesn't agree with what my mind says, but you're God. And because you're God, I know that I can trust you even if I don't agree in my mind. Even if in my physical state this doesn't make sense, I know that I can trust God. And when we learn how to obey, even when we don't agree, that is when we supersede ourselves and really begin to see the hand of God work. You are not going to agree with everything that God is asking you to do. But you, even in a disagreeable state, can be obedient, right? Now, listen, if Moses had been obedient, he would have seen the promised land. The problem was he did not agree with the Lord just giving them water. He wanted to make a point to them that they were like, hard-headed and this was frustrating and I can't believe you and why don't you believe God? And because of that, he made a big production of what God said, just speak and give them the water, right? God said, just speak and give them the water. Moses said, no, we're not just about to speak. I mean, he didn't say it in these terms in the Bible. This is me taking liberty with the text. But I mean, he like, we just gonna speak and give them the water. No, God, I don't agree with that. I think we need to make them understand that this is frustrating. And because I think we should make them understand it's frustrating, I'm going to hit this rock twice so they know I'm frustrated. So they know this don't make no sense. And because he could not just do what God said because he didn't agree with how God said to do it, he robbed himself of the promised land. Sometimes you have to just be, you know what? God said, speak. I'm just going to speak and let the water come. And, God's way is the best way, right? We've got to get like that. And that requires humble submission. That requires you laying down your will and picking up the will of the Father. That requires that nevertheless that Jesus did in the Garden of Gethsemane. That nevertheless, not my will, but thy will be done, right? No, it doesn't matter what I want. It doesn't matter if I agree. It doesn't matter if my emotions line up with it. It doesn't matter if my thinking logically aligns with what you say. It really doesn't matter. Did God say it? If God said it, then that's what we're going to do. And so Joshua, although it doesn't tell us his emotional state at all, we know that he called the priests, told them to come together. He said, take up the Ark of the Covenant. I'm in verse 6. Have 7 priests carry trumpets in front of it. And he ordered the army to obey. He said, this is what God said. He didn't give them. He didn't take a vote. He didn't cast no lots. He didn't say, I think this is what God heard. What I heard from God. Maybe, we'll put out some fleas. He didn't do what we're going to read that Gideon does in the future. He didn't do none of that. He said, God said it. Look, the man of God was standing right in front of me, whether it was angel or whether it was Jesus himself. He was standing right in front of me. He told me clearly what to do. I don't have to question what God said. I just need to move. I just need to do. And so Joshua does that. And so the army marches around the appointed amount of times. They march around 6 times. They have a guard in front of them and a rear guard behind them. They're marching around. Now, keep in mind, people are like probably on the top of this wall watching them march around. There are watchmen on the wall, right? Watching them as they march around, like, what are they doing? And then, Joshua tells them in verse 10, he said, but Joshua commanded the army, do not give a war cry. Do not raise your voices. Do not say a word until the day I tell you to shout. Then shout. That, my friends, is our memory verse. I want you to keep that, star that, underline that, highlight that, whatever you need to do. I'm going to read it again. Do not give a war cry. Do not raise your voices. Do not say a word until the day I tell you to shout. Then shout. Some of us, we get ahead of God. God tells us something. He gives us prescribed order and how to do it. And we get so excited about the work that we start shouting about it before we actually do the work. And Joshua is like, look, I don't need y'all to say a word. I just need y'all to walk. Can you imagine? You know you about to take it. You know God's going to give it to you. You know you got the victory. Let's say that's one scope that people are on, but yet you've got to walk around for 6 times, 6 days, right? And say nothing, right? Or you may be on the other side of that. You like, what is this? You want to complain. You want to say, I don't understand this. You want to say, I don't know. This doesn't make sense. I don't know. At the end, what if at the end of 7 days nothing happens? What if we doing all of this for nothing? You want to say that, but either way, whether you are this full of faith or full of fear person, Joshua said, I don't want to hear none of it. He said, listen, walk around silently until I tell you to shout. Walk around silently until the appointed time that God has set aside for us to receive this victory. Some of us are shouting when we should be silent. Did I say that? Yes, I did. Some of us are shouting in the silent times. There are times when you shouldn't be saying anything. You just need to humbly walk until Lord gives you permission to shout, right? Some of us are opening our mouths when we should have them closed in obedience, humbly walking, doing the work that God says. It's not fair work. It's not going to, look to everyone else like you are victorious. It's not going to look like you are even doing the will of God while you're just walking around in a circle doing nothing. But let me tell you something. There's going to come a time, an appointed time to shout. And you need to humbly and silently sometimes obey until that appointed time. What happens? They wake up on the 7th day. They follow along. It looks like the same day, except, whoa, they went around once. The watchmen probably like, okay, they've done this thing again. And wait, they're going around again. And the watchmen are like, whoa, what's going on? And then they go around again. And 6 times they walk around. On that 7th time, they actually get to make some noise. They blow the horns, the trumpets, they shout victory, and the walls of Jericho fall down. Now listen, historically, when we think about walls falling down, we think about them falling, crumbling, right? Either inward or outward. But basically, this is saying that like the ground opened up and the walls just came down, right? Into the ground. So like, because if it had fell one way or the other, it may have fallen all on the Israelites who were walking around and they could have been killed, right? But, theologians believe the ground opened up and the wall just went down into the ground. And so now they go in and they totally take over the city. They kill everyone like the Lord says. They, do exactly what the Lord says to do. And listen, this is important. Verse 18. I'm starting 17 so you can remember what happened before. I'm starting 16. The 7th time around, when the priest sounded the trumpet blast, Joshua commanded the army, shout, for the Lord has given you the city. The city and all that is in it are to be devoted to the Lord. I'm going to say that again. The city and all that are in it are to be devoted to the Lord. One more time. The city and all that is in it are to be devoted to the Lord. Only Rahab the prostitute and all who are with her in her house shall be spared, because she hid the spies we sent. But, verse 18, but keep away from the devoted things, so that you will not bring about your own destruction by taking any of them. Otherwise, you will make the camp of Israel liable to destruction and bring trouble on it. All the silver and gold and the articles of bronze and iron are sacred to the Lord and must go into his treasury. Now listen, we have talked about first fruits. We have talked about tithes. Think about it. This is the first conquest that the Israelites are doing on this side of the Jordan in the promised land. And so think of it as first fruits. And I don't know if you've read this or ever thought about it like this, but this would be the first fruits. This is the first conquest in the promised land. Therefore, as first fruits, everything goes to the Lord. So God is like, look, this is the first victory I'm giving you in this land, but everything comes to me. First fruits, first fruits. And so God said everything, the silver, the gold, everything is supposed to come to the Lord's treasury, and it's supposed to go to the Lord. Everything, right? We're going to get back to that in the next chapter, right? They actually saved Rahab. He says the spies who actually were saved by Rahab in the first place, he sent them to get all of her family out, and then they destroy the city. And then Joshua curses it and says, anybody that ever tries to build it up again, cursed be them, right, to the cost of their firstborn and the cost of their youngest. Remember this, because we're going to come back to it in the future. And the Lord was with Joshua. You know, after people heard what happened to Jericho, the Lord was with him. And people were already, their hearts melting, just hearing him go into Jericho. And now that all of this has happened to Jericho, people all around their hearts are melting even more. And so what happens? Well, Joshua then says, well, you know, it's this little town next, you know, called Ai. And we're just going to go over here to this little town. And, you know, it's not that many people. And we don't even have to send our whole army, right? Not even the whole army got to go. You know, it's like 30,000, but we're just going to send 10%. You know, we'll send about 3,000 people over to Ai, and we're about to take over that city. And so they send 3,000 people. We're in chapter 7 now. Over to Ai, and guess what? Ai kicks their butt, runs them out. This little town that's smaller than the 3,000 people that he sent, runs them out, kills 36 of the Israelites, and runs them all the way back. And Joshua is trying to figure out what happened. We just had this amazing victory in Jericho. What is happening that now this little thing is taking us out? Some of you feel that way. You have like an amazing victory, an amazing blessing, an amazing healing, an amazing something. And then here comes this little old thing and it's able to take you out. And you may feel like Joshua, who tore his clothes and lay before the Lord like, what is this, right? What is this? God, how can you let me be so victorious over here, and then over here, I'm just getting defeated, right? That's how Joshua felt. Let's read it. Verse 6 of chapter 7 says, then Joshua tore his clothes and fell face down to the ground before the ark of the Lord, remaining there till evening. So he's on the ground till evening. Like, he lay on his face in the morning and just like don't even get up. Like, he ain't even saying nothing to God. He just like in the ground, like, whoa, God, what happened, right? And then the elders of Israel did the same thing. They just laid on the ground like, God, what are we doing? They sprinkled dust on their heads. And Joshua finally says, right, alas, sovereign Lord, why did you ever bring this people across the Jordan to deliver us into the hands of the Amorites to destroy us? If only we had been content to stay on the other side of the Jordan. Pardon your servant. In other words, excuse me, forgive me, Lord. Pardon your servant, Lord. What can I say now that Israel has been rooted by its enemies? The Canaanites and the other people of the country will hear about this, and they will surround us and wipe out our name from the earth. What then will you do for your own great name? So Joshua is like, Lord, how could you do this? Basically, I mean, he didn't say that, but that's what he's saying. Do you know that everybody's going to come for us now? Everybody's going to come for us now. They have heard that this little town beat us up. Everybody about to come for us, Lord. How could you do this? Why didn't you just leave us over on the other side of the Jordan? Why would you bring us over here to be, just utterly slain by the people over here, right? Listen to what God says. I love God. I love God. I really, really do. Listen to what God says. The Lord said to Joshua, stand up. What are you doing down on your face? Don't you love God? God looking at him like, boy, get up. I mean, basically, that's the equivalent of what he said. Stand up. What are you doing down on your face? Boy, get up from there. Boy, get up, right? God is saying, boy, get up. What you doing down there, right? And basically, he says, and I'm summarizing, if you had came and asked me, I would have been able to tell you that there was sin in the camp. And what we don't see is before Joshua went to Ai, that he ever inquired of the Lord, right? He just kind of won this battle in Jericho. Remember, Jericho was handed to him. He spoke with God, and knew exactly what to do with Jericho. But then he got kind of beside himself and was like, let's just go to Ai. Let's take the next city. Let's take the next city, right? So he just goes and takes Ai. And God's like, if you had paused and just even asked me, I would have been able to tell you that it was sin in your camp, and you probably need to take care of that before you go to your next battle, right? And that's how it is with us. Like, we have these big battles that we win, and it's like, yes, but then there's this little piece of disobedience that we have not dealt with, and we just go on, and now we on the road. Like, if God did that, then I know he gonna do this, right? And we just run ahead of God and try to do that next thing, but we didn't deal with ourselves, right? We didn't deal with we got a little arrogant, and we didn't deal with ourselves. We didn't check ourselves. We didn't make sure we were still okay with God. We didn't make sure we were still in the will of God. We didn't humble ourselves and make sure that we give God the glory. Hey, he just humbled himself and, gave God all the glory. God would have been able to say, thank you for thanking me, but you might want to deal with this one thing over here, right? We do that. And then we run on to the next thing, and we fail at something so much smaller than the thing that we just won at, and it takes us out. Why? Because we let pride set in, and we did not humble ourselves to ask God, should we go pursue the next thing? And so the Lord told him, Israel has sinned. They have violated my covenant, which I commanded them to keep. They have taken some of the devoted things. They have stolen. They have lied. They have put them with their own possessions. That is why the Israelites cannot stand against their enemies. They turn their backs and run because they have been made liable to destruction. I will not be with you anymore unless you destroy whatever among you is devoted to destruction. I got to read that last line again because it's real powerful, and I hope you hear it right. I will not be with you anymore unless you destroy whatever among you is devoted to destruction. And so basically God is saying, look, they've stolen from me. Remember, everything that they got from Jericho was supposed to go with God. They were supposed to kill all the people, and they were supposed to take all of the goods, and it was supposed to go to the treasury of the Lord. So anyone who took anything would be stealing from God. Stealing from God himself. God said they have lied, they have stolen, they don't put the stuff with their own stuff like it was theirs. I can't give you any more victory until you follow the rules of the first victory that I gave you, right? I gave you the victory, kept my part of the covenant, but you didn't keep your part of the covenant. And that's what we really need to understand. God gives us the victory. He does his part of the covenant, and we say things like, Lord, I'm going to read my Bible more. Lord, I'm going to pray more. Lord, I'm going to be in church. And, God does his part. He heals your body, saves your family member, blesses your household, pays the bill, keeps you from falling, whatever it is. He does his part, but then you don't keep your part of the covenant. And then you run off and think that you're going to get the next blessing the same way you got the last blessing, but you didn't keep the covenant. Ooh, I know. Ouch, ouch, ouch. We've got to keep the covenant, people. We've got to be obedient. We've got to do what God says. So they go through this elaborate process where they start casting lots to find out actually who did it. They come up with that it's Achan. Achan confesses, right, and says, yes, it's me. I got the stuff. I dug a hole. It's in my tent. Here it is. And it was like a robe and some other stuff. And he said, okay. And so Joshua was like, well, we got to take care of this, right? We know we got to take care of this. And basically they bring him, his family, his oxen, his lambs, his whatever he had, whatever belonged to Achan, all of it, they stoned and got rid of it, because that's just the way things were done back then. And I know you might be like, ooh, that's so cruel. That's just so cruel. But, hey, purge. It was about purging. It was like, get it from among you, right? And so they got rid of that. And then in chapter 8, God says, now you can go back to Ai. And he gives them this elaborate plan of destruction for Ai, which had to do with them pretending like they were going to Ai the same way they went before. And so I only saw like these 3,000 men coming from them again. And since they had won last time, they were like, ooh, let's go chase and run after them and get them and kill some more of them like we did last time. Only they didn't know that Joshua had set up, people around Ai's camp. And so when they started chasing Joshua and his men, those who were hiding uprooted themselves and burnt down the city. And by the time, all of the men had run out to chase Joshua, and by the time they turned around to see their city burning, they were being closed in on from both sides, right? And so, yes, they conquer Ai and killed the king, right? And burned down Ai until it was ruined, impaled the king on a pole till evening. I mean, it was gruesome, right? It was gruesome. And then finally they renew their covenant with God. So it's like, okay, we broke the covenant because of what Achan did. It's time to renew the covenant. So they renew the covenant with God. Joshua actually takes time and reads the whole law to them all over again. Like, we need a review. Like, have you ever, maybe we should do that. I don't know if we do that, right? But when you know you've broken the covenant, maybe you need to take time and just go review. Lord, you know what? I know I've read this before. See, we don't do that. We like, I already read that word, right? Or you have people saying, I know what the word says, right? But when you mess up, somewhere you messed up, somewhere you missed it, right? Somewhere you didn't do what God said. Was it because you didn't know? So Joshua was like, let me review this with y'all again. Everybody listen this time, okay? Everybody listen. I don't want no talking to your neighbors. Don't be playing with the babies. Don't be talking to your friends. Everybody listen, because I don't want to be in this position again. Is everybody listening? Everybody listening. This is what the law says. And so Joshua goes through the law again. And then this chapter ends with a story about the Gibeonites and how they fool Joshua. And it's funny because Joshua does the same thing again. And it's like, while he's reviewing the law for the Israelites, he needs to remember the law for himself, and he needs to pattern himself after his leader, because Moses laid on his face about everything, right? Everything. Even when he broke the law, right, or was disobedient to God, he had laid on his face first, and he knew what he was supposed to do. He just didn't do it. But here Joshua is sort of having this pattern where he's not really seeking the Lord like Moses did, right? And so the Gibeonites come to them, and they have this big, huge ruse going on where they're trying to make themselves look like they're from far, far away, trying to make a treaty with Israel. And they done, let some bread mold and made their sandals look old and made their clothes look all torn and beat up, like they done came from really far. And Joshua takes it upon himself to examine them, along with, some other leaders in Israel. And they're like, yeah, they're from far away. We'll make a treaty with them. But it specifically says in verse 14 of chapter 9, the Israelites sampled their provisions, but did not inquire of the Lord. They just made a treaty with these people. Nobody asked God. It was a simple question. God, are they from far away like they said they are? It was real simple. God, like, I'm waiting to tell you, but you ain't asking, right? And because of that, they got food. And the Gibeonites, who they should have been destroying them like they were destroying everyone else, now will become a thorn in their side then you will see in the very next chapter, they got to go to war with some people, maybe before the time that they were even supposed to, because the people mad at the Gibeonites because they made allies with Israel, and so they actually came to fight the Gibeonites. They weren't even coming to fight the Israelites, but because the Gibeonites had made a treaty with the Israelites had to stand up and help defend them. And so they're in this war with like 5 kings and 5 armies, simply because they made a treaty with, they may have been taking these kings one at a time had it not been for them making a treaty with the Gibeonites. Ultimately, Joshua cries out for the sun to stand still because he needs more time to defeat them. God says, I will give you all the time that you need. God defeats them. He throws them into confusion. He throws hailstones on them. The Bible says more people die from hailstones than they die from the sword. So the Lord is definitely helping them with this fight. So, I mean, to me, the word in that is, even when you get yourself in a mess, God's still going to have your back. I mean, it's one of the reasons why you gotta love God, right? You gotta love Him. Even, I mean, they got themselves in this mess, but God is like, you know what? Don't worry about it. I still got your back. We didn't have to be here like this, but I still got your back. And so God is killing more people with hailstones than they ever killed with the sword. God holds the sun for a whole day so that they will have more time to deal with their enemies. And ultimately, they defeat everybody. The 5 kings are killed and impaled and held up for everyone to see until the end of the day. And then they're thrown back into the cave they were hiding into. And finally, Joshua gets this, right? They actually, after this, began to just conquer. And it's a long list of other conquerors at the end of chapter 10. It starts a long list of people they just go on war with, conquering after that. We're going to pick up in chapter 11, where we continue with this list of people that they conquer. And then chapter 12 is going to tell us sort of a list of everyone that is conquered. And then chapter 13 is going to open up with a list of lands that they did not conquer as of yet. And then they're going to start dividing up the land. And we'll talk about that for the remaining chapters 14 and 15. So join us in the next video. Hopefully you have been brought up to speed on some of what's going on in Joshua, but we will keep you up to speed on even more as we continue. Until next time, you be blessed and know that I love you and God loves you too. In Jesus' name, amen.